Hello and welcome to the Huxley Speaker Series. My apologies for a short delay. Thank you for your patience. We will jump right into it. My name is Stefan Freeland. I'm the coordinator of the series. As usual, we'll have time for questions and answers and discussion at the end, so you can add those to the Zoom Q&A. As always, we'll try to get a video of this posted so you can share it with your friends later on, and it'll be a week or so for that. Today is my great pleasure to welcome Hilary Franz, who has been having technical issues and just dropped out of the Zoom. So we are going to stall, hold that, yep, she's back. Hilary, are you with us? Hi.
I am. Can you see me?
Yeah, great. Welcome. Glad to see you, I might add.
Good to see you.
Okay, are you ready to go? You should be able to. This is you drop right into it. But anyway, our guest today is Hilary Franz. Hilary is the Commissioner of Public Lands for Washington State, in charge with 6 million acres of public lands. No small task. But she comes from a family of farmers and landowners as well, which I'm sure serves you well. And I graduated from Smith College. So I'm going to turn it over to you. If you need anything, I'll come back, Hilary, for your sake, and give you questions at the end. So you've got a half hour or so it's all yours.
Great. Well, thank you. First, I'm going to assume you can hear me. Okay, great. I wish I was there. I'm actually not even in Washington. I'll give you a little secret most people don't know. I'm actually in Utah. After this very historic legislative session that has been significant for the environment and our critical issues around climate change, including wildfire and forest health, I got away for a little bit. So I'm actually exploring all the public lands of Utah and trying to learn what they're getting right to bring back home, and maybe also learn what they're getting wrong so we don't repeat. But it's great to be here. I want to thank you all for the opportunity. I look forward to all of us actually being together, because it's so much easier to do these when you're not talking at a screen, as you all are probably used to now. To just sort of make sure everybody knows about the work that I do as the Commissioner of Public Lands and as the head of Department of Natural Resources. We are an agency that actually oversees 6 real agencies. One, we oversee 2.6 million acres of aquatic lands. So think the entire coast, your Puget Sound, your rivers, lakes, and streams. We have a proprietary role where we have leases on those lands with everything from ports and marinas to single family dock owners to we're the largest gooey duck producer in the state. We're in the actually nation. We're the one of the larger shellfish producers. The money we generate from those leases goes towards salmon habitat restoration and protection, along with our ocean acidification and kelp research and science that we do, along with increasing public access to our shorelines. I also oversee 3 million acres of upland. So think everything above water, and I don't mean financially, I mean literally above water. 2 million acres of forest land, 1 million acres of agricultural land. We're actually the largest wheat producer in the state. We're becoming one of the largest vineyard and orchard producers. We also have a pretty good commercial industrial portfolio, everything from the Edgewater Hotel in Seattle to Costco, Safeways, Fred Meyer's, warehouses. We are also rapidly expanding our clean energy portfolio, and we have some of the largest wind development, but also now we're expanding and have actually the largest solar farms in the state going in. In addition, I oversee the second largest amount of recreation land, second to the federal government. The Baker to Bellingham recreation planning work that we are doing in your backyard is an example of how we are leveraging the lands we have to be multi-use, multi-benefit, and trying to bring a diversity of recreation opportunities to every member of the state, from ATV and ORV to mountain bike, hiking, horseback riding, scuba diving, cross-country skiing. We're trying to do our best to leverage the lands we have, keep them public and make them accessible, and help ensure everybody can get outside and enjoy the beauty of the state and the benefits it provides for our health, mental, spiritual, and physical. I also oversee the only regulatory role I have, which is I regulate the forest industry. So large and small landowners, for small forest landowners like my grandfather, who came here in 1938, to the large industrial for timber companies, Weyerhaeuser, Sierra Pacific, Green Diamond. And I oversee Washington State wildfires. So as we know, this is becoming an even more significant issue, and I know I'll talk a lot about it today. And if that wasn't enough, I oversee Washington State geology. So think about everything that happens underneath the surface of the earth. We have the threat of 5 live volcanoes, the threat of the big earthquakes, tsunamis, landslides. We do all the education, data analysis for local and state government, and helping them prepare more for these critical natural risks that we have within our very volatile and beautiful landscape. So that's a bit about what I do. There is clearly no slow day at the office, and it's gotten only more challenging as we've seen increasing change in our climate, hotter, drier temperatures, increasing storm events. We are finding that our work is literally moving from one natural disaster to another. And obviously wildfire is the most significant. We have seen year after year, 5 of the last 6 years, historic catastrophic fire seasons. 2015, 1 million acres burned. 2018, 440,000 acres burned, but we had the worst air quality in the world from Spokane to Seattle. We saw 40% of our fires west of the Cascade, which was a new phenomenon. And then obviously everybody remembers the catastrophic fires of 2020, where within about 72 hours, we had 600,000 acres burn. We saw fire spread in 5 hours, 100,000 acres, 60 miles. We tragically lost the little boy's life, 1-year-old, as his family tried to outrun that fire. We saw the town of Malden and Pine City destroyed in just a few hours as the fire raced through that community. And we had 53 fires on the first day alone, 24 the second day. 820,000 acres total burned last year. And this year is already heating up, and we're already seeing an increase in the number of fires, where in April alone, we had 215 wildfires. Last year, we had 160. On average, over the last 10 years, we've had 53 fires in April. So you can see we are on a trajectory where our hotter, drier conditions, longer seasons are changing the condition of our forest, changing the condition of our landscape. In addition to that, we have a significant issue of our forests being in very, very poor health, partly due to hotter, drier conditions that I've talked about with climate change, but also because of the management of those forests over the last 20, 30 years, where we used to, when fire hit, we'd put them out rapidly, federal government, state government, and we didn't let fire do what it naturally should do on the landscape, which is remove the smaller diameter trees, remove the dead, dying disease trees, the weaker trees, and give more space and more ability for the larger, healthier trees to just get healthier with the critical nutrients they need, the critical water resources they need. And unfortunately, we now have very, very dense forests that are all competing for limited resources. In central and eastern Washington alone, we have 2.7 million acres of forest that are already dead and dying. About half of them, that is federal land, and then private and state land and tribal land. We've set a historic goal, a very aggressive goal, to restore the health of 1.25 million acres of forest in eastern Washington alone over the next 20 years. It's probably the most aggressive goal our state has ever set. We are on a pace and scale to truly restore 70,000 acres a year for the next 20 years to do that. And in addition to that, we are now focusing on the west side. As we see an increasing number of fires on the west side of the state, we know that the issues we've seen in central and eastern Washington are quickly coming over to the west side. We've had a wildfire in the Olympic rainforest almost every year for the last 4 years. Something that I think as a child growing up in the Northwest would have thought was unheard of. We know that Whatcom County is seeing more fires every single year, along with parts of our coastline and up and down the I-5 corridor. So part of our focus over the coming years is going to be now looking at our west side forests, which are very different, understanding the forest health challenges that these forests are facing, and working to develop a forest health plan for the west side. Our big goal here in Washington State is to keep the evergreen state from turning charcoal black. We are very far behind in preventing that. But the great news is, besides having the forest health plan, the 20-year forest health plan, we now secured the most significant amount investment in Washington State's history in wildfire response, forest restoration, and in community resilience. Three of the most significant areas we can focus on to truly change the trajectory. And as I say, make sure that the last few fire seasons, where we've had smoke in the air for much of our summer and couldn't go outside, do not become our new normal. This historic investment will bring us $125 million a biennium for the next 4 bienniums. It's about $500 million. Frankly, it is probably the most significant investment our legislature and our state has made in our forests. One, it'll be investing in wildfire response. The kinds of equipment we need are air resources, helicopters, fixed wing, as well as firefighters on the ground who can help get on these fires quickly and put them out. I have 11 helicopters to fight the fires in Washington State. 10 of them fought in the Vietnam War and have the bullet holes to show for it. We have too few resources, and we have very outdated resources. In addition, we used to have about 43 full-time firefighters, and we're the largest firefighting agency in the state. We were able to expand that to around 65 firefighters. Now we will be able to increase that by adding 100 full-time firefighters. And when they're not fighting the fires, they will be working to restore the health of our forests, getting in and removing the dead, dying disease trees, the smaller diameter, bringing prescribed fire in, because fire is natural in our forest. What isn't natural is how sick our forests are, how dense they are, and how we've got to give our forests the ability to fight these fires on their own, which they naturally can do, and we're doing before humans were here. The third bucket is our community response. We saw with the town of Malden how tragic 80% of the buildings were destroyed in just a few hours. Home after home, the entire Main Street by the wildfire. That community had 8 volunteer firefighters to fight those fires. 5 of them were fighting a fire on a neighboring town when that fire raced through that community. Many of the homes were completely destroyed, except for there were a few amongst the destruction, amongst the chimney and foundation that was all that was standing on most homes on these postage stamp lots. But in every block, there was one home completely untouched. And the fact is that wasn't luck. It's that our fires, we can make our homes, our communities, our neighborhoods more resilient to fire by creating defensible space. I say to people, we've learned now for a year how to create defensible space around ourselves from COVID. The same rule now applies to our homes. So fortunately, through this investment, we will now have the opportunity to start to change the trajectory on helping make our communities more resilient to those fires. As I look forward, and I start my second term in this position, my next focus and a significant focus is, in addition to how do we prevent the evergreen state turning charcoal black, is how do we prevent the evergreen state turning concrete gray? Our forests are our most significant natural resource in Washington State. Not only are they our largest carbon sequestration opportunity as we face the challenges of climate, they are also critical for our water resources, for stabilization of our lands, especially in the context of increased storm events, increased floods, increased landslides. They are also the most sustainable building product we have here in Washington State. And one of the great things that COVID has provided is an opportunity for me to see into everybody's home. And now I know that everybody in Washington State is very fond of wood product and using it quite often in every part of their day. the most sustainable thing we can do is be growing our wood and our forests right here in Washington State. Unfortunately, our forests are at significant risk of conversion. Over 700,000 acres have converted of our forest land in just roughly 20 years, between 1975 to 2000. Now with COVID, we're seeing that people can live and work anywhere they want. And we're finding that many areas that were working forest land are now being converted quickly into homes, whether it's a second home, a summer type home, or whether it's a subdivision. If we do not start to step in immediately with an aggressive plan to change the conversion of our forest, prevent the conversion of our forest, we will watch the most basic environmental resource, the most basic economic resource, and the most basic social resource, health resource we have in Washington State be lost in just the next 20 plus years. So one of my big efforts and push will be setting and developing a plan similar to how we did the forest health plan of protecting 1.25 million acres from dying and restoring the health of the forests. We're now going to be putting together a plan to protect 1 million acres over the next 20 years to prevent from conversion. In addition, we're launching a new salmon strategy that leverages the work we've been doing, where we've removed 50 Boeing 747s from our waterways, as well as replaced all but one remaining culvert, those fish passage barriers that are preventing our salmon from getting upstream where they spawn. We're also, so we are linking up in a new effort, the watershed, an entire watershed from the trees to the seas. This is something that has not been done before, where we will bring federal, state, private landowners, local government landowners together in one entire watershed, bring all the resources of the Department of Natural Resources from our agricultural lands, our forest lands we manage, our aquatic lands we manage, our urban forest program we do, as well as our ability to do projects on federal lands through a partnership I signed a few years ago called the Shared Stewardship that now allows us to do everything from salmon restoration to forest health to recreation on federal lands. This work is hopefully going to be launching within the next few months. Our goal is to prove that when you actually concentrate efforts and bring the full breadth of your agency to in a focused area that links up our landscape that our salmon depend on, that we can change the trajectory of our Chinook, we can change the trajectory of all our salmon as well as our orca. It's going to be a big effort, but it's an exciting one. So I know you guys want to go to questions and answers. I want to say a big part of our work, we are honored. We've been super successful in the last 4 years in the wildfire response and forest restoration, but we are at the beginning of that challenge. We are looking forward to launching a similar campaign and effort that we did for wildfire response and forest restoration in the area of preventing the conversion of our forests and keeping the evergreen state evergreen. We have a lot of work ahead. We're looking for young, talented people like all of you to come join our team. And I just want to thank the opportunity. I look forward to questions and answers if you all are ready.
Fantastic. Yeah, wow. It's kind of mind-boggling how much is yeah, never a quiet day. A couple of questions coming in, and then we had a few from pre questions as well. One is going back to the defensible spaces around buildings and houses. Are there efforts to put in to laws to require that? And I guess that for me then segues into, is it better to do the carrot versus the stick, incentive education versus requirements?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I don't have the stick. I have one stick, and that's only in the regulatory environment of our forest lands, right? Our timber landowners. Most of that stick lies with the legislature and with local governments, which you are probably well aware, many of the listeners are. That really lies in the context of building codes, development codes. I think they're part of where I'm tackling it right now is an education campaign, because we already have 2 million homes that are already at risk today. That is not going to be based on future development and building codes. We need to make sure that those 2 million homes are taking all steps necessary to reduce the risk. Not only does that reduce the risk to their family and to their property, but it also reduces the risk to our firefighters who are putting their lives on the line. As we launched that, we just launched a campaign called Wildfire Ready Neighbors. We only had enough resources to launch it in 3 communities: Chelan, Oak County, Okanagan County, and Spokane County, 3 of the highest risk counties in the state. With the funding that we secured from House Bill 1168 this last session, this will enable us now to expand it to more communities. As that work happens, the education starts to happen, not only in homeowners, but also in local government officials and legislators, right? And our hope is that from that, we'll be able to expand a conversation and work at the legislative and at the local level on what really needs to be happening. We'll also be able to elevate the great successes too.
Can you speak to what the particulars of how one makes a more defensible home structure?
Yeah, so sorry, yeah. I have vacation brain, so you may have to repeat questions twice or break them up. So, so specifically, it literally is creating a defensible space around your home. Ideally, it's 6 feet, 10 feet. You're removing sort of the trees that are sitting up against the house. You're cleaning out the gutters that have wood and debris and leaves that are easy to fire, to cause a fire. Many of the home fires are actually started by embers that are flying. So if you can clean off those roofs, ideally you have a roofing material that is more resilient to fire just in general. You're picking up, so if your grass, mow your grass, keep your grass wet. I literally saw a home in Omak, and the homes in Malden were largely because they had created an irrigated circle around their house. Well, every single home was destroyed in the Cold Spring fires in this path of this fire. This home that had an irrigated circle around it, fire just moved around it. So that woody debris, branches down, trees that are leaning up against the house. If you go on our website, you can learn more about this, and you can learn more about Wildfire Ready Neighbors too.
Yeah, great. So sort of like, as you mentioned, there was a clarification question. What did you mean by removing Boeing 747s?
Yeah, is that great? Okay, so I love this one because it catches everybody's attention. Like, so we, part of our work has been removing derelict vessels. We all know about those boats. You guys know it well up there in Whatcom, those boats that are sinking into the water. I have one boat alone. When I started this job, it was going to cost $1 million to remove that boat. I needed money from the legislature. We haven't been able to get much money from the legislature to remove it. It now costs over $3 million. And we have those kind of vessels throughout our waterways. So specifically, we have removed a significant amount of the derelict vessels. We removed creosote pilings and all the debris and crap we see that is in our waterways. So a total of 50 Boeing 747s worth of toxic material. That helps people kind of put a mindset to it. I will say one of the things we've been doing is realizing that for every boat we remove, we got another 3 that show up. And we've really got to get at the heart of the problem. So we've been trying to work with the legislature to get more ability to remove those boats earlier, for people to voluntarily turn them in without a cost, so they don't feel, so they see that it's more valuable to turn it in versus abandon it. But we also have worked innovatively that, in helping grow rural economies. As we know, many of our communities are struggling economically. They were even before COVID. And we've actually helped get investment and funding for a boat recycling facility. So I talked about our Vietnam War era helicopters. Every one of those come to us like a shell from the Army, right? And then our mechanics put them together part by part by part that they grab off the internet for Vietnam War helicopter fans out there that have those parts sitting around. Well, the reality is we have a lot of boaters out there, many of them with old boats and different types of boats. So we've now helped launch a recycling facility on the Port of Ilwaco, created 25 jobs. As the goal is that it actually creates the opportunity for making it pay for itself, so it doesn't keep costing us just to remove them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There's a couple questions getting at, I'm gonna try to sort of blend some of them together, but getting at climate change and how does that tie into what you're planting now and getting our forests so they're healthy? Many consider planting trees or preserving forests as a good way to offset carbon output. The climate shifts we already see put these carbon sinks at risk. Is that kind of math in play?
Wait, say that again. Let me make sure I understand the
Yeah,
question.
I mean, so trees and forests are carbon output, offset carbon output, but climatic shifts that we are already seeing put those carbon sinks at risk. So how does this risk get accounted for in the carbon offset calculations?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question, and I'm not the mathematical scientist here to give you the formula. What I will say is there's a couple of things. First, we have done a carbon inventory of our entire state, every single forest land, not just state lands, but federal, state, private. So we really actually understand what is it we have here when it comes to the carbon sequestration value of our forest, east side forest, west side forest. In addition to that, we've completed a climate risk assessment where we looked at all 6 million acres of our land, and especially our 2 million acres of forest land, to say, what are we seeing in the change of these forests over time, or our waterways, our ag lands? And in that, we're specifically looking at the species that we've had in some of these areas that are likely to be changing over time. So we are exploring the context of carbon sequestration from how do we prevent the loss of those forests to wildfires, and that's the forest restoration piece. Like, the more we can get in there and remove the dead, dying disease trees and give the healthy trees a fighting chance, the more chance that the healthy trees won't completely burn up, like we've seen in many of our moonscape landscapes, where now we can't even get new seedlings growing in there because the intensity of the fire was so significant. All the way to the context of what are the specific type of trees we're planting. Our seedling nursery, we are the seedling nursery for the state. Small forest landowners, large forest landowners, we're looking and exploring what are the types of trees we need in there. Our forest health plan probably has the most sort of information about how we make sure that the removal of parts of our forest, in that restoration, the dead, dying disease trees, the smaller diameter, is done that is purely based first on science. What is going to ensure the long-term health of those forests? We looked back 100+ years. What did that forest look like? So that it informs what the forests should be looking like to be able to actually reduce these fires.
Yeah, okay, great. And I'm going to try to wrap up a couple more forest questions, and then we've got other species to think about too. One is that in general, the DNR's forest practices are more stringent than on privately owned lands. And do you see an opportunity to bring the private land rules up to the level of state-owned lands to better protect all?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, I'll say right now, obviously, what do they say? I would say forest and fish has been probably one of the most volatile areas of our state, right? I mean, we all remember, and even species, right? We remember the spotted owl days. We remember the challenges that we've had. And I think right now, I've spent enough time watching sort of as the challenge between forest and fish has been going on, that if we all remember back 20+ years ago to the TFW and the Forest and Fish Agreement that was reached by tribes and timber, it was Billy Frank Jr. saying, there's a better way than fighting, and there's a better way than litigating, and it's going to be better for our fish. And no part of us wants this state to lose its forest land, whether it's private or public. And this goes to the issue of where we're seeing unprecedented level of conversion. I'm going to be launching this August an effort that brings all the principles together from small forest landowners, large forest landowners, the tribes, the environmental community, state and federal agencies together to see if we can re-engage around the original principles that Billy Frank Jr. had, and see if what is the path forward that ensures what I think all of us want, which is we want working forests, we want conservation forests, and we want salmon. And we're going to be better getting there together than doing it against each other.
Yeah, great. Absolutely.
Yeah, wish me luck. I'll need it, but
yeah, easier said than done.
Yeah.
A question about the Western pine beetle, which seems like, and I agree with it, with the question the person haven't heard as much about in recent years. Is that, do you have any updates on how, in specific, the Eastern Washington forests and health?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say to you, I'm not going to be able, this is where Derek Churchill, our preeminent forest health scientist, will tell you about every bug, every insect, every disease that is spreading. I will be honest, I'm up at the 40,000 foot level. How do I get the money and then get it implemented and make sure that we can go faster and more effectively? I will say that I think we're seeing the existing diseases and insects we've had for a while are still out there. Moths are one that has gotten even more intense for us. I think the West Side Forest is the one that we are pretty shocked by, about how we're seeing such a quick and rapid decline now on the West Side Forest. And we don't yet have the answers for that. And that's going to be a big part of our work. But I would say, I think there's a great opportunity for you to have Derek Churchill to come back and get into the nitty gritty on bugs.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So noted. Always looking for
the money. It's hard enough work for me to deal with the legislature and everybody else.
It does. Can you comment on, is there a conflict between salmon recovery and forest recovery, salmon health and forest health? I mean, sometimes those advocacy groups seem to be at odds. You seem to be saying, let's bring everybody to the table.
Well, okay, so forest recovery, I'm thinking about forest health. Is that where that question is going? Which is a bit different from forest practices. Let me do the forest health side and maybe I'll bring the other one too, right? So if anybody's seen a fire like the Cold Spring Fire or the Norse Peak or the Jolly Mountain Fire, where they burned so intense and so hot because the forests were in such decline, like the Okanagan Wenatchee Forest, right? Even the average person can see that those forests are dying. The intensity of that fire was so significant that besides destroying those forests, they also destroyed all the fish and wildlife habitat that was there, as well as the species, because the fire is so intense and hot. So what we do is we recognize that this isn't about just chopping down all the forests and now the salmon are going to be healthy and fires are going to stop, because that's not true. What we want to do is bring forest health in, because forests naturally can fight these fires. They always have, before humans were messing with them. Our forests don't look natural right now. Part of that is climate change. Part of that is our fire suppression practices. So the goal is we look back and we use forest health science, and this is the work that Derek Churchill and others have been leading at the agency. And they specifically set the prescription that needs to happen. We do it at a watershed level. We've identified the worst, most high fire risk forest lands with the closest proximity to population centers. We do it at a watershed level. We're agnostic to property lines because disease and insects and fire don't follow property lines. And then we set the specific treatment that needs to happen on that landscape based on science. What will help that forest by itself fight those fires 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years, so they don't become these volatile, hot, intense fires. That's how we balance that context of protecting our salmon and protecting our forest, which they go together. Now, on the issue of conversion, there is a balance there in that piece. Right now, the threat of conversion of our forest is so significant. Every single day, if you watch real estate, like I do, because we're the largest real estate company technically in the state, or landowner in the state, you're going to see an unbelievable amount of the Hancocks and the Sierra Pacifics and the Green Diamonds, the large timber companies, as well as the small forest landowners selling their land, because they can get far more money when it goes into development, whether it's a large mansion in the woods for the person to have that little slice of heaven they now realize they can have and work from, or whether it's a full-on development. All of that development is bad for salmon. It will lead to more runoff. It will lead to less protection on the streams. It will reduce their food source, the quality of their water, the quantity of their water. And so I think there is a balance here of making sure that we keep working forest land working in Washington State. It does mean that they have to have protections on it. We have some of the most stringent forest practice protections in our state, I mean, in Washington state than other states. Doesn't mean we can't always be doing better on state lands and on private lands, but we do have to make sure that we're not tipping that balance to the point that it's now converting. And we've now done worse harm for our air quality, for carbon sequestration, and for fish and wildlife habitat and water quality and water quantity.
Great. And can you speak to, you talk about 1 million acres you're trying to divert from conversion. How do you choose which acres qualify for that?
So let me start by saying, just like our forest health plan, we started with what's the big idea? What's the big problem we're trying to solve? How are we going to solve it, right? And then we brought in the scientists to help us. And that was the develop and 33 organizations from all spectrums that have worked within forestry, from the environment and tribes to timber, to develop that forest health plan, right? That's where the science and the real focus got on how do we prioritize watersheds, okay, by condition of the forest, but as well as proximity population source. We're going to be doing the same work when it comes to conversion of our forest lands. We have already, the forest action plan that came out last year has a pretty high level that shows what counties are at the highest threat of conversion of their forest lands. Now, what we want to do in that context is have a valuation for carbon sequestration value of those forests, the water quality and water quantity component, the salmon element, right? So that work is still, that is just beginning. So I'm actually, most people have not even heard yet my 1 million acre, save 1 million acres from conversion. You guys are like literally like the second people to ever hear it. And so it's really at that idea stage. But the goal is big, and we're going to need to bring science within this. It's going to lead the entire effort.
Yeah, good luck with it.
Thanks a lot.
No, I mean, yeah, genuinely, that's great. Are you familiar with the proposal, Jennifer Belcher and Peter Goldmark, to stop commercial harvests on state forests west of the Cascades? And if so, do you have any comments or perspective on that? Yes,
I'm very aware of it. So first of all, I'm going to say this. If you look at right now, 40% of our lands is already set aside in conservation. So only 60% of our 2 million acres of forest land is actually in production. And we have the highest for sort of protections on our forest lands in the state. As Jerry Franklin says, you have the most rigorous forest practices on your lands, not just in the state, but in the nation, in many, right? And you now take that with the fact that a couple of things, I'm going to say why I don't support that plan fully. What I support, is that the most sustainable thing we can do is grow our own wood right here in Washington state. If I am shipping it from somewhere else, I'm exporting any environmental damage or impacts to somebody else's problem, not ours. 2, I'm also increasing the greenhouse gas emissions from transportation because of the shipping impacts of it. And 3, I'm also not aware or won't know if their forest practices are better or stronger or more stringent than ours. As I look at your house right now, I see you have wood frame house, wood frame windows. You've got shelves and a desk. I'm sure this is just one room of your house, and there's plenty more if we went around. And that's the truth of everybody else. So harvesting timber is not bad, especially if we have the strongest environmental protections on us. Especially if people are not saying, hey, this isn't like a beyond coal or beyond oil campaign, because nobody's saying, let's stop using wood, because it is the most sustainable building product we have. In addition to that, I think there are consequences separate from how we live that is going to have an impact that people aren't thinking about. It sounds really nice, set it all aside, look at these beautiful parks that are conserved, without thinking about the fact that 50%, in many cases, the mills that we have left, DNR represents 50% of the wood product in those mills. If anybody's been to the Okanagan-Wenatchee forest, it has the worst sort of forest condition on federal, state, and private lands. That's because there is no mill anywhere near. They've all gone out of business. Right now, any forest health project I have to do, I have to pay to have them do the work. Whereas in other cases, I don't. Like if I do a project in the Colville National Forest, I break even, or I can make money on that pays for more forest health work to be done, because the smaller diameter wood can go into cross-laminate timber, mass timber. Some of the, as we try to get the space, or the dead, dying, disease trees also can be made into cross-laminate or mass timber. And then some of the other trees can be made into wood product that you have right in your home. If we start to see the loss of those mills, we will also then see the loss of the working forest land that keeps the evergreen state, frankly, evergreen. And that is going to lead to greater impacts to our environment as it converts to commercial, industrial, residential, and other uses. That we need to be thinking about how many acres of forests do we need in Washington state for conservation, for getting the most sustainable carbon sequestration, the critical fish and wildlife habitat. That's why we've set aside 40% for protection. Much of our federal lands is also set aside for wildlife, fish and wildlife protection. We then need to say, how much working forest lands do we need here in Washington state to meet the needs of our population, right, for wood products, similar to what Sweden did, and move away from a some less in forest land to a some more in the area of conservation and working forest land. Not a small task, but honestly, if you're going to be true to the problem and get at the best solution, you got to be focused at that level.
Shifting to the other level, a lot of forest conversion is driven or constrained by local zoning, which is, not your direct purview. Does DNR have any sway, influence, involvement with that kind of forest planning at that local zoning level?
So we don't have a lot. I mean, we don't oversee local governments. We don't, the legislature, Department of Commerce is really in that role. And as we know, the Growth Management Act is one that has a lot of goals, but not necessarily a lot of specific regulation context that is overseen by an agency that holds local governments accountable, right? Our role, I think, is largely in the context of we have the ability to buy and sell land. And so part of what we've been looking at is the opportunity is we're seeing the threat of these conversion. How do we make sure that we are buying opportunities to expand our forest lands that we have, bringing in those that are converting? So Weyerhaeuser has been selling some of their land in key areas. We have small forest landowners. We try to buy where we have the resources to do it because our lands are right there. So it's easier to manage and to maintain and to protect. And we also have, if it's conservation value, great, it's conservation value through our natural resource conservation area and natural heritage conservation area work. It can also be through, if it is quality sort of better for timber than for habitat, depending on how, especially if it's been more plantation style forestry, then we can bring that in and actually bring it into strong forest practices that we have for our own agency. We have a checkerboard problem in the state where many of our lands are, in really spread out and they're landlocked. They may not be high value ag, high value habitat, high value forest lands. We have identified those lands and we're working to sell those lands off to and be able to then purchase more higher value forest land and higher value agricultural land that helps prevent sort of the breakup of these blocks that we're seeing. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of money within a pot to go and buy. So I have to sell to buy.
You just answered the next question, which was, we think of DNR as managing land, and you're talking about buying and selling. And so,
oh yeah, we buy and sell. We buy and sell. Yeah.
There's a related question about retained rights, both for lands that DNR might be buying or selling. Is that an option? Well, two questions, I guess. One is, what if you buy land that, if you're trying to conserve on land that Pope Olympic maintained the mineral rights and they want to dig it up, how's that going to help the forest? That makes
I haven't run into this particular problem. It sounds like you have, because you got, I think we try to prevent easements running with the land that are going to prevent us from managing those lands to meet our environmental responsibilities and our fiduciary responsibilities, right? Sure, we might have roads that go through or utilities, right? I mean, we have a lot of easements on federal lands. They have a lot on our lands. So those tend to be run with the land, but we try to avoid the ones that are a lot more stickier, if I could use that word.
Yeah. And then going the other way, is there anything where DNR would buy land, the land that you're selling, do you ever put, restrictions on it, so that other, to keep it from being developed in certain ways?
Yeah, I mean, so right now we haven't done a lot of sales. Most of the sales we have done are more commercial industrial. So these are not your high value conservation or working forest, working agricultural lands. First of all, we're not selling. If we're doing any transfer on working forest land, it's usually a transfer, right? So we'll give one away that is not strategically in the right place to secure others that are better suited or may have better value. But one of the tools that we're looking at in the protection of these lands will be sort of those conservation easements, but we're actually trying not to get rid of forest land or get rid of agricultural land. We're trying to gain.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. We're starting to run out of time, but there's a number of questions along the line of how can we get involved? How can we help? What would be the most beneficial way for retirement volunteers to get involved? Are there job opportunities for Huxley graduates? And please tell me that you're not just looking for young and enthusiastic, but also old and crafty people to help.
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel old and crafting, so I'm always looking for old and crafting. Oh my gosh, I didn't mean that. It's like when I think Huxley, I apologize. So first of all, we are going to be actually a pretty significant number of positions that'll be opening up as we expand our forest health work and our wildfire response work and our community resilience work. So that legislation is huge. We used to get $40 million a year just to fight fires, and that's it. Like nothing in the other three buckets. So we are rapidly accelerating, expanding that program. So check back I would say actually within the next month or two about what's coming on Department of Natural Resources job openings. Volunteer, did I hear volunteer? I like that. Did I hear volunteer? Yeah. I think, and the other thing I was going to say, we are also expanding our conservation corps, right? So part of the work of the funding that came from wildfire, forest health and community resilience is developing a conservation corps and expanding the ones we already have. We also got significant money, so do pay attention to that. If you're not necessarily in the forest, but you're interested in aquatic areas, more money has come down from the legislature for that work. On volunteer, I'm not the expert on this, but what I will do is, how about I get information? I mean, I don't think we have the ability for volunteers, but we work closely with nonprofit organizations, whether they are our Sierra clubs and Washington Trails associations, to our mountain biking community, to our horseback community. Every one of those communities has a nonprofit organization that is all about trying to increase access and opportunities for people to get outdoors, to the context of beach cleanup. And so probably that's going to be the best. We don't have a lot of resources for managing volunteers. And then you can sign up your neighborhood to become more wildfire ready any day, and you should take that on.
Even on the west side. Yes.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding? Yes. We had a fire in Bonnie Lake.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely do not say that. You have to say, everybody on the west side, you are now in wildfire risk area in certain areas. You do need to take, especially Whatcom, Snohomish County, Skagit County, San Juan County has got some red zones there, believe it or not. Yeah. I'll be quiet.
Yeah.
Get to work.
But if you do have links, we can add them to the event page for today's talk. And so if there are places that'd be great.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll get you guys the forest health plan work, the wildfire work, and then also the other items, as well as conservation corps and other things. So I'll have them sent to you. Okay.
Great. Very much. Yeah, that'd be perfect. Thank you so much for your time on your vacation, no less.
Yes.
We'll let you go back to enjoying Idaho.
Not Idaho, Utah.
Oh, Utah.
I got to see Bears Ears, Zion, Arches. I've been mountain biking and hiking. Like, it's more like boot camp, if you want my honest opinion. I'm more exhausted and tired than I was during a legislative session, but it's been fun.
A different kind of tired. That's great. Okay. Let me do a quick plug for next week. We've got Sean Arlano, who's a biology faculty and looking at deep sea, looking at deep sea floor life in the water column. And not just Sean, but she's also going to be joined by, she's getting ready to ship out on a research vessel, and she's got a bunch of students who are going with her. So she's going to bring some of her crew. So that promises to be fascinating as well. Again, Hilary, thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to meeting you all. Take care. Bye.
Okay.